Well, hi, I'm Lindsay, and today I'm going to be talking about how to design your GIS for today and beyond. And this is a topic that I'm actually really excited to talk about. So, a little bit about me. My technical title is Director of GIS Managed Services at Rock Technologies, but primarily I am our project manager. And Rock, on a day-to-day basis, helps folks take their GIS up to the cloud. So we work with folks, moving them to the ArcGIS Enterprise platform, and we help folks to move up to the cloud and take advantage of all the cool stuff that the cloud offers. I am both Esri certified and AWS certified, and in previous careers, I've had experience as a GIS director and GIS administrator. So what did you all want to know in today's talk? So the three big things that we advertised and we got really good feedback on were how to transition from AGOL to Portal, how to transition to the cloud, and how to get into automation and make your GIS innovative. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to do a basic knowledge transfer, and then we're going to talk about what you probably all expect us to talk about, which are exact, in the weeds technical challenges. And we're going to cover some of those as well as their solutions. But then I think that a lot of times business challenges get overlooked for GIS professionals. And so, I'm in this unique position of helping folks with these immensely complicated and technical implementations in the cloud. But I also get to see the technical challenges and the underlying business challenges. So we're going to talk about both of those. And then finally, we're going to tie it all together and hopefully empower you to really make a successful GIS plan for your future. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cover the basics of the GIS lifecycle, and then we're going to get into three specific transitions that we see folks have a lot of pain points with, and finally we'll tie it all together for you at the very end. I just want to mention that I'm going to be going through all of this really quickly. It's going to be like a bit of a fire hose of information, but we love talking about this stuff, so if at any point you want to reach out after the talk and have a conversation about any of these concepts, we're totally happy to do that. So getting right into it, we're going to talk about the common GIS lifecycle. And I want you to keep this lifecycle in mind as we move through the rest of this conversation. So you'll see that I do have 4 bubbles here, and 2 of those are kind of lumped together in what we call phase 1. Phase 1 is going to be basic desktop usage, so ArcMap and ArcGIS Pro, as well as basic web mapping. And especially when you get that basic web mapping component with ArcGIS Online, which later you might hear me refer to as AGOL, when you get that component into the hands of users, it's really going to spread like wildfire. Folks are going to use it, they're going to play with it, they're going to love it. And so at some point, you're going to want to take advantage of the more advanced functionality that Esri offers as part of the Enterprise platform. And ArcGIS Enterprise includes, we're going to be adding basically ArcGIS Server and ArcGIS Portal into the mix to make it Enterprise GIS. And then finally, you might at some point want to take advantage of the really cool stuff that the cloud offers, such as high availability, auto scaling, things like that. You might just get tired of maintaining your on-premise computer servers. Whatever the reason is, that is what we kind of consider to be phase 3. So we're going to get right into talking about the first life cycle transition, the first major transition we see, and that's kind of from phase 1 to phase 2. And you'll notice here, I know that we're going to talk specifically about AGOL to Portal, but you'll notice here that I say AGOL to Enterprise. And the reason that I say that is because when you go to Enterprise, you're adding 2 things, ArcGIS Server and Portal, and both of those kind of have some considerations that we have to keep in mind. So this is kind of the first technical problem that we run across in this whole AGOL to Enterprise transition. So basically, this is talking about the challenge of moving from hosted AGOL content to ArcGIS Server content. And I might have these sort of backwards, but I want you to pay attention to the right-hand side of this slide first, okay? So this is basically what people tend to do with hosted AGOL content. And I wanted this to look really chaotic because it tends to, a lot of folks, their AGOL accounts are kind of a little bit crazy, right? So the problem here is that you may have many different data sources. You're pulling data from all those different data sources into map documents or pro projects, pushing those up to a bunch of different layers. And then finally, you're building maps and apps in AGOL based off of that data that you're pushing up into AGOL where it lives in Esri's cloud. At some point, you may actually want to serve out your data. So you may decide, you know what, I want to incorporate ArcGIS Server into the mix. And a lot of times we do see folks involve ArcGIS Server in their stack before they do the full enterprise deployment or make the transition to Portal. So when you involve ArcGIS Server, it's actually going to kind of force you to get a little bit more organized. It's totally possible for you to have kind of a chaotic ArcGIS server too, but inherently it kind of streamlines everything and forces you to get more organized. You're going to have a database or multiple, maybe some centralized data sources, whatever they are. you are going to push those out to map documents, and you're going to quickly find out that if you have many different map documents, it's really going to be a pain in the butt to publish to ArcGIS server. So you kind of start to organize your map documents logically into these folders and services that you can push out through ArcGIS server. Now the challenge here is that, you've spent all this time, right, making these maps and applications in AGOL, creating cool symbology, making them look really good. And maybe at some point you decide, I really want to repoint my maps and apps from looking at my hosted content to looking at content that I'm actually serving out. And that might be a challenge, and I hope visually you can see the challenge here, right? From the right-hand side to the left-hand side, kind of squishing everything together. That kind of represents the challenge that you'll have in resourcing. And so some of the things that you should think about ahead of time are, how do I have a clear path for how my data gets from my local environment to AGOL? How do I keep track of it the whole time? And how do I have a clear and concise publishing strategy that will also work with ArcGIS server? The second technical challenge that we see here centers around security models. So again, you can have challenges, with your security model with just AGOL moving over to ArcGIS server and portal. But oftentimes where we really see some challenges is when folks have involved ArcGIS server and AGOL. So with ArcGIS server, with either of these, you're going to want to secure your data. And with ArcGIS server, you secure it at the service level, and you can have roles and groups and permissions and all that sort of thing. And with AGOL, you secure it with groups and sharing and permissions and that kind of thing. So the challenge becomes that when you decide, okay, I want to move to a full enterprise deployment, I want to use ArcGIS portal for web mapping, and I want to use ArcGIS server, the vast majority of folks decide that they want to have a federated system. And what that essentially means is that what happens in ArcGIS server is going to happen in portal. It's a shared security model. So again, I created these diagrams so that hopefully you can visually see the challenge here. That if you have one security model in ArcGIS server and you have one security model in AGOL, and then you try to move to a federated security model with ArcGIS server and portal, if those groups and roles and permissions at ArcGIS server, at your service level, and at the AGOL level, if they don't really relate to each other, it's really hard to make that into like one consistent security model. So that's kind of the second big technical challenge we see. And really the solution here is just to educate yourself on what security looks like at the ArcGIS server level, the AGOL level, portal level, and what federation looks like. And it's going to make it a lot easier for you to design your security at the front end so that you can have a really successful migration. So then talking about the business challenges, like I said, this is something that I don't think gets brought up a whole lot in GIS talks. And of course, we want to talk about the technical problems, but underlying every technical problem is a business challenge. So one of the things here in the two problems that we just covered, a lack of education and a lack of preparation. So you should always be educating yourself, and you should always be learning more about the next product in the GIS lifecycle. And even if you never get to that next stage in the GIS lifecycle, there's no downside to educating yourself. And then the other thing I just want to quickly highlight is that a lot of AGOL to enterprise problems can kind of be caused, especially on that first chaotic slide with lots of data, can kind of be caused by not communicating with your end users. When you first start using AGOL, your end users are going to love it. They're going to want to use it, but they're going to be pushing whole bunches of data up, right? And if you're not communicating with your end users, you might not be totally sure about what data is mission critical, what's not, and it might make it really challenging when you go to migrate. So moving into the next lifecycle transition, we're going to talk about phase 2 to phase 3, and that's going to essentially be the lifecycle for GIS of moving from on-premise to the cloud. Now, I don't want any of you to zone out at this point, if you're thinking that, oh, I'm never going to move to the cloud. If you have anything to do with enterprise, which you probably will at some point, all of the topics that I'm about to talk about are going to be very relevant to you. So even if you don't move to the cloud, all of this is going to be important information for you. So talking about those technical problems. So first of all, security is a huge one, right? And especially when we're talking about on-premise to the cloud, but no matter what, you should be thinking about, is your enterprise publicly exposed, or is it only available locally? Are you using HTTPS? Do you have certificates? All of those security questions are very important to consider, and those can really be stumbling blocks for folks. This ties in with authentication, which is a part of security, but also a part of ease of use, right? So how do you currently authenticate into your enterprise? And that's going to be ArcGIS server, portal, and your database. How do you authenticate into any of those? And is that mechanism secure, right? And finally, is that mechanism going to be appropriate for the cloud? Because sometimes, kind of tying into point 2 under networking, Your GIS might be moving to the cloud when the rest of your organization is not. So we got to think about what those authentication mechanisms and what your security is going to look like. The third point, like I said, that we need to think about as well is networking. So what are you currently integrated with? Do you have architecture diagrams? Do you understand what your third-party applications look like? That's a really huge one that we see a lot of folks kind of stumble with, is not having an appropriate inventory of their third-party applications or not totally understanding how their GIS is networked with everything else in their system. So those are the technical challenges that we see. But as you kind of move up the ladder in terms of hierarchy, so when we're moving up the GIS lifecycle, moving up in this kind of GIS hierarchy, those business challenges become more and more pronounced, and the technical challenges that they cause become much bigger and harder to overcome. So if you can address those business challenges up front, it's going to save you a whole bunch of heartache when it comes to making these big jumps between transitions. So one of the first things I want to cover here when we're talking about on-premise to the cloud, we see a lot of folks struggle with support. And the first thing is, do you have an advocate or a high-level sponsor? So do you have somebody who can help you out within your organization with budgetary requests and who can really be that person who speaks up for GIS? You should not, your high-level sponsor advocate should not be seeing your GIS for the first time when you go to ask for money. They should really be identified early on and like help develop your GIS, be involved with it, be there for you so that when you do go to make those budgetary requests, you have that type of support and they understand why you're doing what you're doing. This ties into point 2 here, which is, have you worked in a bubble, right, with your GIS, or did you create it hand in hand with your IT, your DevOps, your DBAs? You know, it's going to be super important for GIS and IT to work together. There's a lot of knowledge that GIS can share with IT, and that IT knowledge is going to be really important for you. So again, you don't want your GIS to suddenly become a parent to IT when you want to make a big transition. You really want to work with them hand in hand from the beginning. It'll make your life so much easier. And finally, have you been actively communicating with your other business units? GIS is an awesome product. There's always more product to sell. People love it. They want to use it. And so you don't want to be at a point where you don't quite understand all the ways in which your GIS is being used within your business. And you don't want to be making a big jump like up to the cloud and realize that one of your business units has mission critical data that can't be moved. The next thing I want to highlight here is resources. And so do you have a business plan? And the big thing I'm going to focus on here with your business plan is it needs to be based on capabilities, not necessarily technology. Because technology changes, the capabilities are going to, I can almost guarantee you, are going to stay relevant. So 10 years ago, we were trying to push GIS data out to the web. We're still trying to push GIS data out to the web. The technology has just changed. And having that business plan is going to help you out tremendously when it comes to planning for budgetary requirements, technical requirements, and it's going to really help you with those relationships with your high-level sponsors and your IT. And the second thing I just want to quickly highlight is when we talk about resources, we often think about money, but we also need to think about people, right? So in order to make these big jumps in the GIS lifecycle, did you hire appropriately? Were there skills that you were missing or skills that you wish that you had? And it might not necessarily be that you hire folks. At ROC, I mean, that's kind of the niche that we fill, right? We have this very specific GIS cloud expertise. And so for a lot of folks, we help them out with that specific thing so that they don't have to hire that, you know, expertise on staff. Whatever it is, whether you're reaching out to an expert like us or you're hiring somebody, do you have an understanding of what the skills you're going to need are in the next kind of transition phase? So then finally, in the life cycle transitions, we're going to talk about moving past phase 3. So we're going to talk about automation and innovation. And this is a slide that we're going to spend the least amount of time on, but it's kind of the fun one to talk about. So again, if you guys ever want to talk about any of this stuff, please feel free to reach out to us. We really do love talking about this stuff. We think it's fun. And the automation and innovation piece really is the most fun part. But you got to keep in mind, like I said, as you move up the hierarchy in this GIS lifecycle, those business process problems that you might have are going to become more and more amplified and make your technical challenges more difficult to overcome. So on the left-hand side here, I have the technical challenges that we see folks kind of struggle with when we're helping them to get into advanced automation and innovation. So the first thing with your data, you got to think about how your data was designed. Was it designed for automation, or do you have data kind of living all over the place? You know, do you have a clear understanding, clear organization for what your data looks like? And then also, are your users used to automation? Have they been using templates the whole time, or is this going to be a new thing for them? With your enterprise, have you gotten to the point where you can integrate with other really cool products? And even outside of that, within the Esri ecosystem, did you get the right capabilities? Do you have an understanding of exactly what the automation needs to look like from start to finish in kind of a flow chart type of diagram? And do you have the right capabilities for each stage within that automation? And then finally, with the cloud, did you design your cloud to be durable, resilient, and did you design it to be able to take advantage of the cloud's resources? This can be really challenging for folks because, you know, you can deploy GIS in the cloud, but if you don't have that high level vision of the fact that it's not just GIS that's running on cloud computer servers, it's GIS that's running in this amazing ecosystem of tools that are available to you. So when you design your GIS, you want to design it so you can be able to take advantage of the cool stuff that any of the cloud providers, Azure, AWS, Google, provide. You want to take advantage of running your code in the cloud, having auto scaling, high availability, cool like mobile applications, things like that. You want to be able to take advantage of that. So then moving over to the right-hand side of my slide here, we're going to talk about these business problems. And they really come down to two very huge things. Not many people get to the point in their GIS where they're doing advanced automation or they're truly innovative. And to get to that point and be successful, you have the technical expertise to overcome any technical problem, but you have to have the leadership and you have to have the vision. So it's going to be uncomfortable for people to get to a point where you're implementing advanced automation and especially innovation. That's going to be a really uncomfortable one. And you're going to have a much higher chance for success if you've built a consistent narrative, you've been a strong leader, and you have a really good vision. You can explain to people why you're doing what you're doing, you motivate and inspire them, and most importantly, you know what questions to ask, right? So you can, like I said, get over any technical challenge if you know the right questions to ask at this point in your GIS lifecycle. So finally, I just want to relate this all. I want to talk about making your GIS business plan. And this next slide is super simple on purpose. There's a few really key concepts that I just wanted to drive home that relate fundamentally to the topic that, the title of this presentation, right? So how to design your GIS for today for what you're facing tomorrow. And so you're always going to have technical challenges, right? We covered some of those as well as their solutions. So AGOL to portal, moving up to the cloud, innovation and automation, you'll have technical challenges with that, but they go hand in hand with those business challenges. And those business challenges can have a wide array of technical challenges. So if you don't have relationships, if you don't have high-level sponsors, if you haven't educated and prepared yourself and understood the GIS lifecycle, it's going to cause a lot more technical challenges than you would anticipate. So if you can kind of keep that in mind and understand both of those, it's going to help you out tremendously. The things that I also want to drive home, you should have a 1, a 5, and a 10-year plan for your GIS. Now, this might sound kind of lofty because technology changes, but remember, we want to focus on capabilities. The capabilities that you want to have with your GIS are probably not going to change. The technology might, but those capabilities, if you can have that plan in place, it's going to help you to identify and work with a high-level sponsor, work with your IT, and you're going to have a much higher chance of success for planning for your GIS. You also want to educate yourself on the GIS lifecycle. Like I said, there's no downside to understanding what comes next in the life cycle and kind of preparing yourself and your GIS for it, even if you never get to that point. You should also expand your knowledge outside of GIS. GIS is becoming so much more tightly intertwined with IT. And so it's important to start looking at training programs that are not just GIS specific. And finally, but most definitely not least, you want to create positive relationships. So you want to have those positive business relationships with your IT department, your high-level sponsors. And if you have those from the beginning, you're going to really have a much higher chance of success for planning for your GIS. So I know that that is a massive fire hose of information. Like I said, us over at Rock Technologies, we love talking about this stuff and we think it's tons of fun. We'll be sending these slides out to you after this, and hopefully it can kind of help you to plan for your GIS, have an extra tool in your back pocket. And like I said, I know it's a lot of information we covered. So in the survey that comes up next, if you want to tell us what you'd like to hear more information about, we'd be happy to tell you. And you can also reach out to us directly, and we love talking about this stuff.